If you grew up playing survival horror in the 2000s, you probably have a very specific memory of Fatal Frame 2: Crimson Butterfly. That sensation of holding a camera as your only weapon against something you definitely didn't want to see up close. It's the kind of game that stays in your head long after you've turned off the console. And now, with the remake arriving, many people are revisiting this story. But there are things about this game that many might not know. It's not about the scares, it's not about the gameplay, it's about what was happening behind the scenes, the design decisions, the mythology that inspired it all, and the hidden details that completely change how you view the story of the Amakura sisters. So stick around, because these 10 curiosities will make you look at the remake with completely different eyes. You know that moment when you're playing Fatal Frame 2 and the camera seems to have its own mind of its own? In the original, the Obscura was iconic, but sometimes you felt a lack of control, as if you just wanted to adjust the focus or zoom in on that distant spirit before it attacked. In this remake, Team Ninja didn't just preserve that soul, they rebuilt it with layers of intentionality that completely transformed the tension of every encounter. The new feature that excited me most are the filters and associated special shots. The paraceptual filter, for example, isn't just an aesthetic change. Its special shot can stun spirits, creating that sacred window of breathing room amidst the chaos. Meanwhile, the exposure filter focuses on boosted damage, turning a desperate defense into an opportunity for a precise counterattack. Suddenly, Team Ninja and Konami decided to celebrate the resurgence of two of the greatest Japanese horror franchises in history in a very elegant way: a costume swap between the protagonists. Mio and Mayu Amakura can wear Hinako Shimizu's school uniform, and the protagonist of Silent Hill F can wear the outfits of the Fatal Frame sisters. Simple, but incredibly well thought out. What I like about this approach is that it respects both universes without forcing a cross-narrative that wouldn't make sense. No one needs to explain why Mio is in the world of Silent Hill or how Hinako ended up in Minakami Village. It's purely aesthetic, a visual celebration between two sister franchises that share the same love for Japanese psychological horror. Sometimes the best collaboration is precisely the one that needs no explanation. What positively surprised me was learning that this content will be available as free DLC for both games. That's no small feat. In a market where any character skin can cost a fortune, the decision to deliver this crossover for free is a gesture that shows the goal here is genuinely to celebrate the fans and the return of these series, not to monetize every detail. For those who follow both franchises, seeing Mio and Mayu and Hinako's school uniform will carry an interesting emotional weight. The Amakura sisters carry all that fragility and silent terror of the original, and putting different clothes on them is almost a way of imagining these characters in another kind of nightmare. It's the kind of detail that seems small, but dedicated fans will love to explore and photograph within the game. Something that really impressed me when I learned more details about the Fatal Frame 2 Crimson Butterfly remake was realizing the level of commitment Team Ninja has brought to this project. We're not talking about a simple resolution upscale or that kind of remaster where they throw a filter on top and call it a new game. This is a true remake, built from the ground up with everything that entails. Think about it. Games 4 and 5 in the series received remasters, and while they were welcome projects, their core structure remained the same. Fatal Frame 2 is being treated completely differently. New graphics, a rebuilt sound system, and, what excited me the most, the gameplay has also undergone a complete overhaul. This means Team Ninja didn't just modernize the game's look, but rethought how it feels in the player's hands. This is huge for anyone who knows the series' history. Crimson Butterfly is considered by many to be the best in the franchise, and carrying that weight requires responsibility. Rebuilding from scratch is a calculated risk because you could lose the essence that made the original special. The game wasn't content with just recreating what already existed. They went further and added completely new areas to Minakami Village, along with side stories that were never present in any previous version of the game. This changes the entire conversation about what this remake represents. Anyone who played the original knows that Minakami Village was already a dense place full of secrets and a suffocating atmosphere. But there was always that feeling that there was more hidden in that village, as if the darkest corners of the map held stories that were never told. Now, with these new areas, you'll be able to explore those spaces and better understand what happened in the location's past. This is the kind of addition that makes sense within the series universe. What catches my attention is that these side stories don't seem like content thrown in out of obligation. They exist to expand the village's lore, provide more context for the ritual at the center of everything, and likely deepen characters who were previously just background figures. For fans of Fatal Frame's narrative, this is practically a gift. And do you know what that means in practice? Even if you've cleared the original dozens of times, this remake will surprise you. You'll walk into a hallway that wasn't in the 2003 game and encounter something completely new within a universe that should already be familiar. Few things in gaming are as satisfying as that. To me, this distinction between remaster and remake matters a lot. A remaster preserves an old experience in a more accessible way. A remake invites you to live that story as if for the first time, with new eyes and new sensations. If there's one part of the original Fatal Frame 2 that always stayed with me after the credits, it was the arc of Itsuki and Chitose Tachibana. The story of the two siblings had that tragic weight the series does so well, but it always felt like something was missing, as if their narrative had been told halfway. Knowing that the remake expanded this arc with brand new documents explaining in detail why their ritual failed was some of the most exciting news I heard about this project. What makes this addition so significant is the direct connection it creates with Mio's final choices. In the original, you reach the end with an emotional understanding of what happened to Itsuki and Chitose, but the concrete details regarding the ritual's failure were left somewhat between the lines. Now, with these new documents, the tragedy of the Tachibana siblings isn't just a sad side story. It becomes a direct mirror for what Mio is about to decide. And that completely changes the emotional weight of the game's final stretch. This is well-constructed storytelling. When a remake uses the extra space it has to strengthen thematic connections between characters, rather than just adding content for the sake of it, you realize the developers truly understood what made the original special. Itsuki and Chitose's story was always about the impossibility of saving those you love without destroying yourself in the process, and tying that directly to Mio's choices is a surgical writing move. For those playing this remake without experience with the original, this expansion will make the ending even more devastating because you'll reach it with much more emotional context regarding what's at stake. And for those who already know the story, it'll be that moment where you reread a favorite book and notice a layer you hadn't caught before. 6 endings. When I first saw that number, I had to stop for a moment to absorb what that means within the context of Fatal Frame 2. The original already had that iconic Crimson Butterfly ending that marked an entire generation of horror players. So the idea that the remake not only preserved that, but expanded it to 6 different outcomes is simply ambitious in a way few remakes dare to be. What intrigues me most is the system behind the new endings. They don't appear in a standard first playthrough. You need to enter New Game Plus and use specific items called Spirit Stones to unlock these exclusive conclusions. This is smart design because it rewards players who want to dive deeper into the game without forcing the experience on those playing for the first time. It's the kind of content that makes you finish the game and immediately want to start over with a different perspective. And then comes the detail that really got me. One of these endings is accompanied by a new song called Uchushie, composed by Chukiko Amano. For those who don't know, Chukiko Amano is the voice behind some of the most memorable songs in the Fatal Frame series. She's not just an artist hired for the project, she is part of the sonic identity of this franchise. Having a new composition from her exclusively for a new ending is the kind of artistic care that elevates the remake to another level. In practice, this means Fatal Frame 2 Remake isn't a game you'll simply finish once and set aside. The structure of 6 endings, with hidden content in New Game Plus, and a soundtrack that expands as you explore, was built to be revisited. One of the things that bothers me most in horror games is when secondary characters seem to exist only to provide quick context and then disappear. The original Fatal Frame 2 always had figures around Mio and Mayu who clearly had their own stories, but they stayed in the background due to design limitations of the time. The remake resolved this in a way I consider almost ideal. Side missions dedicated to these characters, with their own narrative and real consequences within the game. Names like Miyako Sudo, Itsuki Tachibana, and the folklorist Makabe Seijiro now have room to breathe within the narrative. Each of these characters carries a piece of Minakami Village's history, and exploring their perspectives isn't just an exercise in lore, it's a way to understand the horror of the place from completely different angles. Itsuki, in particular, considering how much the remake has already expanded his and Chitose's arc, likely has a side mission that will be emotionally heavy in a very particular way. What I like from a design standpoint is that these missions aren't just narrative. They deliver items and add extra ghosts to the ghost list, which is that list of spirits you can photograph throughout the game. This means completing the side stories has mechanical weight within the experience, connecting narrative exploration to a system that fans of the series have already loved since previous games. It's not decorative content. It's content that directly interferes with how you play. This is the kind of addition that defines whether a remake truly understood the source material. It's not enough to make the game look better or add new areas. You need to breathe life into the edges of the story, to the characters who were always there but never had enough of a voice. And when you finish one of these side missions and find that character's ghost to photograph later, the emotional impact is completely different from when you simply read their name in a document and move on. I confess that when I saw the confirmation of a full photo mode, my first reaction was to laugh at the perfect irony of it. We are talking about a game where the camera is literally your weapon, where you spend entire hours framing terrifying ghosts to survive. And now there's a mode dedicated exclusively to letting you stop everything, breathe, and compose the perfect photo of that same ghost that nearly killed you 2 minutes ago. It's the kind of feature that only makes sense within the Fatal Frame universe, and at the same time, it makes all the sense in the world. The digital stickers add an interesting layer of personality. You can transform a genuinely disturbing scene in Minakami Village into something completely different with the right elements in the frame. This might seem superficial at first glance, but in the context of a game that has always used photography as its central language, giving the player tools to visually reinterpret those scenes is almost a natural extension of the game's philosophy. The Obscura was always about seeing the invisible, and photo mode is about deciding how you want to show that to the world. But what really caught me was the system of the ghost dolls, the Shinto twin effigies scattered across the map. Photographing the two together within the same frame to earn extra rewards is an elegant design because it demands exactly what the camera Obscura demands in combat: patience, positioning, and attention to your surroundings. You can't just point and shoot. You need to find both dolls, understand the space between them, and build the correct framing. It's a scavenger hunt that speaks the game's language. What I like about this combination of features is that they extend the game's lifespan in very different ways. Photo mode will generate impressive captures that people will share for years, while the hunt for ghost dolls will have players scouring every corner of Minakami Village with redoubled attention. And considering the remake has already added brand new areas to the map, you now have a concrete incentive to explore every new hallway, not just for the narrative, but because somewhere in that unknown space, a doll might be waiting to be framed alongside its twin. For over 2 decades, playing Fatal Frame in the West meant giving up the original Japanese voices. There was no option, no choice. You took the available English dub and moved on. And for a game whose horror depends so much on atmosphere and character performance, this limitation was always a silent thorn in the side that fans carried without much they could do about it. What makes this even more significant is the historical context. Since 2003, the community had been asking for this option. 20-odd years of requests, forum threads, video comments, and open letters to Koei Tecmo. And now, finally, the remake delivers exactly that. The option to play with the original Japanese voices in an official Western release. There's something very satisfying about seeing such an old and persistent demand finally being met, especially in a project of this magnitude. And it doesn't stop there, because the English dub has also been completely redone, and from what I've heard, the result is excellent. This matters because it means neither group of players was left behind. Those who prefer the immersion of Japanese voices with subtitles have that option available, and those who like playing with a local language dub have a new, carefully produced version at their disposal. It's respect for the player in 2 directions at once. To me, this detail sums up the philosophy behind this remake as a whole. Team Ninja clearly did their homework, listened to what fans accumulated over decades, and made conscious decisions to fix what should never have been a problem. Small things like audio choice might seem secondary compared to new graphics or new areas, but it's exactly these details that show the level of care put into this project. This is the kind of detail that transforms a horror game into something much more disturbing than any ghost could ever be. The original always left this hierarchy within the Minakami Village ritual implicit, but it was never direct enough to make you stop and think about the implications of what you are seeing. The remake, with new documents and Itsuki's expanded notes, puts this reality in front of you without a filter. The ritual always preferred female twins, and male twins were literally treated as a last resort. The word kusabi has never carried as much weight as it does now with this context. What makes this narratively powerful is that this layer of critique regarding the village's Shinto tradition doesn't feel forced or added out of obligation. It was already in the original's DNA, hidden between the lines of documents and the silence of characters who clearly knew more than they said. The remake simply had the courage to illuminate what was always there. When you read these new documents and realize that Mio and Mayu weren't chosen by chance, but by a tradition that saw female bodies as the most appropriate instrument for sacrifice, the horror gains a completely different dimension. This connects directly to Mio's journey in a way the original only suggested. The final choice she must make in the game isn't just an emotional decision between saving her sister or fulfilling the ritual. It is the conclusion of a tradition built on centuries of institutionalized violence against women within that village. Understanding this changes how you read every scene, every document, and every female ghost that appears in your camera. They aren't just victims of something supernatural, they are victims of something much more human and much older. This is the level of depth that separates a remake that truly thinks about the material from one that merely reproduces it. It's not enough to recreate the graphics or add new areas. You must have the courage to look at what the original was saying between the lines and bring that to the surface responsibly. The Fatal Frame 2 remake does exactly that, and the result is a horror that stays with you long after the credits, not because you saw something scary, but because you understood something true about how fear and tradition can walk hand in hand for centuries without anyone questioning them.